YouTube. Why, hi, gorgeous humans, and welcome. Welcome to a Project Woman experience with myself, Abby Adams, and one of our gorgeous Empower Her Them partners, Ali Knight, who is our intuitive soul coach. But she's so much more than that. Ali and I met during COVID, and the relationship was just blossom and bloomed, and she supported me on the first Project Woman experience this year at the Rewilding in Lancaster, and what an experience it was. And it ties in lovely with our conversation today, as we are in spring. It is a time of regeneration, but of those fertile soils. And that's what Ali's going to be talking to us about today, the fertile soils and how we cultivate them. Welcome, Ali. How are you, love?
I am good. Thank you for having me. I'm excited for our chat.
It's always wonderful to speak to you, love. Fertile. Let's go into that word of fertile. For some, it can be quite scary when I speak to them about being fertile. And the interesting thing is that I find with this is the misunderstanding of the menstrual cycle and what fertility means there, because a lot of women believe that they can get pregnant at any point in their cycle, not just a specific point where you have to cultivate the soils around that to receive and procreate. Fertility. What does it mean to you?
It's fertility to me, now that I'm 47 and very much in the throes of perimenopause, if not menopause, means, and has, to be fair, has always meant, apart from when I was trying to conceive my children, when it was purely a biological sort of mechanism, let's say. Now, fertility means it's all about planting seeds of intention, cultivating the kind of environment internally and externally to create that which we desire, which could be anything. It might be new habits. It might be huge things in our business, for example. It might be changes to our relationship dynamics. Fertility is about that sort of, it's like a pregnant pause when you're not pregnant. So it's like that expectant, really rich time pre-growth.
So can we hashtag that though? Pregnant pause. Oh, yes.
You know, like if you have a pregnant pause in conversation, it's like it's a loaded kind of dynamic of, oh, what's gonna come next? Like, what's gonna happen? That's what fertility is to me. And right, like we're about to hit Beltane. There's no better time to be having this conversation.
Can you just explain
Beltane? Beltane is a Celtic fire festival which sits slap bang between spring equinox and summer solstice. It is the height of spring and the beginning, theoretically, of summer. Not that our weather might be showing us that yet, but it is a brilliant time to celebrate, to be expectant, to be hopeful, to be joyful. I mean, when you look at the origins, I've got a guide that I put in my membership about Beltane, about all the fire festivals. It was traditionally a time where, back in the day of traditional relationships, couples would go into the woods, they'd make love, they'd wash themselves in the dew of the spring morning, because it was a time that was known for great what's the word, for basically manifesting children.
Vibration, like the high vibration of the planet.
Yeah. So it's got that kind of really fertile energy. And so I translate this now into, you know, whether you're bleeding or not, whether you're a person with a womb or not, this is a time where we naturally feel a lifting of energy, where we naturally feel a bit more optimistic, perhaps, coming out of the dead of winter. And we've started to see all the bulbs pop up, and we've had spring equinox. So we've kind of started to feel that turn of the wheel. But this is where spring peaks, where it's a really great time to be specific about the intentions that we are planting, the seeds that we're planting for what's going to come to fruition for us next.
There goes the mic drop for me, because what menstruation has taught me, and therefore led me to correlating that with the outside world, is as someone who is, their crown chakra is constantly open, I'm very good at downloading ideas. And throughout my life, I have been a continual idea churner, not realizing that when you use a cyclical approach, it is all about the focus on one thing, not one of many things.
Yeah.
And I feel this is the game changer within understanding that cyclical approach. Although, if I'm being honest with you, the word cyclical makes me feel a bit icky, because it sounds quite scientific. There's got to be a greater word out there for like the ebb and flow of the
It's a flow. It's a flow cycle, isn't it? Like every part is relevant. Every part is relevant. We have to have the darkness and the rest and the hibernation of winter in order to start to prepare this fertile ground for basically putting stuff out there in the higher energy, higher vibration times of sort of cultivation and manifestation and this kind of looking at the fruition of what we've planted way back when. Like, it's all has a purpose. So we've got like the wheel of the year is a perfect cycle to tune into. The lunar cycle is a perfect cycle to tune into. If you're bleeding, the menstrual cycle's obviously a great thing to tune into. We've got cycles everywhere. And that's how it's meant to be. Like, I fully believe that everything has purpose, everything has meaning, everything is as it should be. We're not meant to be on the go 100% of the time. That's why we see so much burnout, because that's what we've been conditioned to think is success. And I could go off on a whole other rant about that, but I won't.
So tell me, we work so much better from stories, don't we? I mean, I know I do. I love hearing and reading other women's stories of how they've been through, learn, and now they understand. So how have you got to this point, Ali? How have you got to this point of understanding this time is about cultivating that fertile soil, and how do you go about it, with a keen interest on how you emerge from winter? Because I think this is a game changer as well, the emergence into this time from the darkness into spring, because a lot of people don't do that. They don't even stop, do they? It's just a continue bang 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 bang. So what's your story here?
So my story is a personal one. It all started with me beginning to tune into myself, my internal world, my energy levels, my moods, my the quality of my thoughts at different times across, let's say, a month. I was bleeding at the time, had a typical kind of 29, totally in sync with the moon, typical 29-day cycle. And I'd started to learn about the lunar cycle. And I began to naturally see that there were times across roughly a month where I would have more ideas, or times where I'd have like the real kind of get up and go to get shit done. Or there were times where I just craved rest and nurture and a bit of a sort of a bit of a closing off, a bit of a natural retreat. And all of a sudden it started to make sense. Like, oh, right. So that retreat is about nurture. So I then have the energy to be more social, to be busier in my business, if I was to look back at something like my Instagram feed, let's say, way back when, I would probably see a pattern of when I was posting stuff versus when I wasn't. And that would very much have tied in with what was going on with me internally. It's a really natural rhythm. When we tune out the noise and we stop for long enough to pay attention to it. So for me, it began very much with tuning more into my menstrual cycle and energy levels, and learning about the lunar cycle and what is very naturally affecting all of us, no matter our gender, at any time of at various different times of the lunar cycle. It's a really purposeful, complete loop, and we just go round it every single month. It's a beautiful process, and when we can tune into that, we can stop beating ourselves up about those times where we feel like we've got less energy and we've got less motivation to get shit done. When we tune into that, we can know, and I now plan my work diary around when I know I'm going to be higher vibe, when I'm going to have more, I want to be more outward facing versus the times where I want to be more retreated and inward facing. And with that comes this massive amount of ease and flow. I'm not fighting against my own natural waxing and waning of energy, and I'm not fighting against the universal natural waxing and waning energy. I'm in sync with it. And the more we can, as humans, the more we can tune into what is a natural cycle for us, the less we have to blooming struggle through life. And for me, that is what this life is all about. We're not here to struggle. We're not here to have hardship and to find things really difficult. We're here to find the flow. We're literally here to allow that flow, surrender to that flow, accept that flow, because then everything is easier. Like literally everything is easier. Who doesn't want that? Like who doesn't want that?
But it's bizarre. A friend of mine who works is a body worker, and he has these most amazing exercises for the eyes. And he says, because they're so easy, people don't trust them. Like they feel that it has to be hard work for them to deserve the benefits. Isn't it bizarre, like the mindset?
That's how we've been conditioned. So the system, the patriarchy, capitalism, we have all been trained at a mind level that to be successful, to be happy, we have to have struggle.
Not true.
Not true.
Not true.
Really not true. And if you look in my world, in my sort of area of work, more and more and more people are talking about how easy it gets to be. If we're just tuned in, if we take our gaze from being completely outwards and following the conditioned narrative, we have to work 9 to 5, we have to stay in the office longer than anyone else because then that makes us more worthy, that makes us more valuable. Those kinds of, that sort of rhetoric is nonsense. It's total nonsense. And I'm on a big mission to help people operate from within here. So to tune in and to live from within, not live from comparison and what everyone else is doing and what works for them. And we think that that's the easy way, is to copy what others do because it looks so easy on social media, for example. Not so. That might be easy for them, but they're not you. So we have to individualize it. We have to tune into what are our naturally fertile times versus what are our naturally more inward, nurturing, quieter, restful times. Rest is one of the most productive things we can do. But we're not told that, are we? We just watch everyone pushing themselves harder and harder and harder, further and further and further to attain this sort of really nefarious goal that we assume everybody wants to achieve, this kind of success narrative. Well, success for me looks completely different to what success looks like for you. So what I'm growing in this fertile time, or what I'm planting, what I'm nurturing, what I'm tending to, is going to be completely different to what my next door neighbour's tending to. Of course it is.
And this aligns perfectly with the conversation. If you are falling into that belief of success and the constant doing, you're never going to be nurturing, and you're not resting, you're never going to be nurturing that fertile soil. It's always going to be depleted to a certain extent. So what are your tools, Ali, for coming into spring and nurturing those fertile soils so that we can manifest this specific thing that we're focusing on?
For me, it is always about, I have a really strong daily practice. And so having those, and that could look, again, that will look different for everyone. So for me, it's always about, I start the day earlier than my children get up, for example, so that I have some time and space to myself. It's about spaciousness so that I can tune in. So for me, that looks like meditation. It looks like journaling. It looks like a really delicious cup of decent coffee. It can look any which way, but that is the ground within which I get to tune in and understand better where I'm at and what the day ahead might look like. So creating that space and time to deliberately tune in is really important. Understanding and accepting that our energy levels are never going to be static. They're not meant to be. We're human. Things will move and shift, and that's okay. But paying attention to that, sort of sitting in some awareness of, well, how am I feeling? What feels good for me today? And coming at life from that point of view, rather than what do I have to do today? What must I get ticked off the list? What must I push towards? What must I strive towards? So I've really moved away at a very deep level, as well as at a mindset level, from pushing, striving, struggling. And I've moved into allowing, receiving, listening to what's going on for me within my body, within my energy, within my mindset, and responding accordingly. So it's a much more gentle, accepting way of living, rather than following the conditioned narrative that we've all been subject to in different ways since we were tiny weeny babies.
Have you found that that's changed as you've matured?
Yeah,
because I know, so I've got small children, and I am very used to having that morning session when I only had one child and he was little, getting up sometimes at 4:30 in the morning, 5 o'clock, and doing, when I was deeply into that kind of Ashtanga yoga practice, doing my practice. Early mornings, like Ali, I'm always used to. But as I've got two children and I see that I want them to respect certain things in life, not just the TV, not just getting on a tablet. I have to not juggle, that's the wrong word. I have to dedicate a certain amount of time to starting my morning for me, and then sharing that morning with my children. You can get stressed out about that, but it's just understanding come back to that focus. But I know you've got children and how that has changed for you. I'd love to hear that story about, how you have evolved to continue to nurture those fertile soils.
So I came about this from a place of struggle. I found myself, when my kids they were probably about 6 and 3. I found myself in a place of deep and persistent anxious thinking. There's lots of stuff going off in my life. My mum had just been diagnosed with Alzheimer's and was declining rapidly. We'd relocated. I'd changed jobs. There was all the stuff going on. And I just found myself in a constant state of doom, misery, worry, like perpetual stress. And I kept saying, well, when we've moved and when we've unpacked all the boxes, then I'll feel better. When the kids are a bit older, then I'll feel better. When my job settles down, then I'll feel better. When my mum has the right care in place, then I'll feel better. All bullshit. We tried all of those things. All of those things did settle. I still felt rubbish. And so I finally reached the conclusion that the only thing that had to be different, that had to change, was me. And so when my kids were about 6 and 3, I arrived at this idea of a morning practice. The only time and space I got to myself all day long was if I got up earlier than everyone else, which seemed at the time counterintuitive because I was absolutely chronically exhausted. However, it was the thing that saved me. So the kids were into a really good routine, which was helpful. So I just knew I had to get up, half an hour before they were due to wake up. And I talked to them about it. So I said, I'm doing this thing to look after myself. When this door is closed, that means mummy can't be disturbed. When the door's open, it's a free for all. And they got that, to be fair to them, they got that. And accepting they were 6 and 3. So, they had the cognitive ability to kind of get that. Since they're now 14 and 11. So, and they're now, this is just part of normal life for them. They know that first thing in the morning, no matter what they're doing, unless they've broken, and they did used to ask some questions like, well, under what circumstances could we interrupt you? Like, they wanted to feel safe within it, right? So I said, well, if you fell down the stairs and broke your leg, then you could disturb me. If you just can't get onto an app on your phone, you can't disturb me. I said, and then they were like, well, what if the house is on fire? I'm like, yes, you can disturb. If it's an emergency.
That is fine. Please do not try and pull it out yourself. That's
exactly.
Okay.
So we had, it's about communicating. We are categorically rubbish at communicating what we need because we've been taught, we've been conditioned to think that that's selfish. However, flipping that completely, we must communicate our needs, because if we don't, how does anybody know? How does anyone know what support we need? How does anyone know how to be along, how to encourage us, or to leave some of that space for us? So my routine, my practice hasn't really changed, other than it's become even deeper, even longer, even more spiritual. Whereas it started out being very much around mindset. It's now very much more in a spiritual realm and a spiritual practice, with some of the mindset that naturally comes into that. But it looks the same. I get up earlier than everyone else. I'm consistent with it. I think I'm on, what did I do? A reset it in January. So I'm on about 117 days of consistent bookended daily practice. Morning for about an hour and a quarter, evening for half an hour, before I go off to sleep. And it's a beautiful way to take care of myself.
When we look at the confusion around this, we see that, a lot of women don't know what they want. And what you're offering is this opportunity to find out, creating that space for yourself to find out. And it from 5 minutes up until however long you can create. What I love about spring is you're able to focus on those archetypes, aren't you? And we see that this is the place for the maiden, also known as the virgin. Now, until the word was bastardized, because virgin back then didn't mean what it does now. A virgin meant a very powerful woman, that was coming into her own.
Yeah, very potent.
And cultivating that energy, Ali, I mean, what are some of the things that we can look at here? Because, I know the maiden virgin can be described as being quite naive, but the wonderful way I look at that is it's because she is untarnished. And actually that naivety allows her to explore without judgment. And I think this is something that I look at in regards to spring, is this exploration without judgment, that stops you with your fears from going forwards?
Yeah. So I think asking ourselves questions is a really powerful way to tune into some of this stuff. So, you know, we can ask a question like, we can ask ourselves the miracle question, which is a tried and tested sort of psychotherapeutic technique. We can say, if I went to sleep tonight and a miracle had happened overnight without me knowing, what would be the first thing I'd notice when I woke up? How would I know that this miracle had taken place? And that puts us in the frame of mind of exploration, of possibility, of expansive thinking, as opposed to staying within the tramlines of our conditioning. And that maiden energy of this sort of very naive, but not naive in a sort of, in a foolish way,
No.
but naive as in anything's possible, like unchained, unanchored, unfettered with the stuff that we quite often end up carrying. Like anything's possible. I can be anyone. I can do anything. I'm full of hope. I'm full of joy. I'm excited. I'm like, I can't wait. That's the maiden energy. But also what comes with the maiden energy is this really deep, deep knowing without the thinking. So this deep knowing of inherent power. Like we can do anything we want to do. It's just our mind that tells us we can't. And our mind is a programmed chip within a computer. And the maiden energy is, I've got all this ahead of me. I can do anything. I can be anyone. I can try whatever feels exciting and hopeful and good and joyful. And so that's what I really want everyone to draw on at the moment, because celestially, we're in the middle of an eclipse season. It is a time where we are casting out old baggage, old shit that we no longer need. And what comes when we when we release, when we let go, when we drop the stuff that's weighing us down, is all this space within which to create. So it's the best time for people to just ask themselves the question, what could be possible for me?
I mean, what a better way to bring this conversation to a close and for everyone to ponder upon that. Fertile soils. We have looked at what is fertile soils? You know, what are they? Where are they? Well, they're in the spring, right? It is the energy that you cultivate towards supporting you throughout the rest of the year. How do you cultivate this energy? Ali has shared with you some wonderful practices, very simple, especially in the morning, whether you've got 5 minutes to an hour, you know, that choice is completely yours. And working with those archetypes, because women do so well with stories, you know, listening to those stories and the archetype of that wonderful, vibrant, young maiden woman who is untarnished by any conditioning and is ready for the exploration. These are wonderful things that you can pick from and just play around with as we move from spring into our summer. If you would like to give Ali a little poke and ask her more questions, I will put her details underneath this. She is also, like I said, part of the Empower Her Them partners that are ready to answer any of your questions in the Project Woman membership link also below. You don't have to do this alone. Female health is a fabulous, fabulous opportunity for your self-growth. So come and join us. Come be part of the conversation. Come be part of the change, because you are so welcome. Thank you, Ali, darling. I will speak to you really soon.
It's such a pleasure. Project Woman is such a brilliant place to be. So thank you for having me.
Oh, always, always. And thank you for watching.